Welcome, everybody, to the Zen Cloud Zendo, Sunday, April the 13th, 2025. Thank you for being here to listen to the Dharma. And today's offering is part 2 on the practice principles, where I'll be concluding, and our discussion will be concluding our discussion of the practice principles, which we started a few weeks ago. The first discussion focused primarily on whether or not we were going to revise the practice principles by bringing them into accord with Barry Magid's second line, waking to a dream within a dream. But the general consensus was to leave the practice principles as they are. So today's discussion will be more of a general way of understanding the practice principles, the way I tend to understand them, and the opportunity will be to use that for your own understanding, or develop your own unique understanding of how they mean something personal to you. Many of us are very fond of the practice principles. We've been chanting them for a long time. It's one of the chants which most of us know off by heart. Caught in a self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. So the principles give us a kind of Zen Buddhism, ordinary way mind Zen Buddhism in a nutshell. A condensed way of understanding our practice, something that which we can always bring to mind to remind us. So the sense in which they're short and condensed is really helpful. On the other hand, because they're so short and condensed, they do sometimes miss out on some aspects of our practice, which I will touch on today. As most of you know, the practice principles in a way are a reinterpretation, a reworking from a Joko Beck perspective of what we could call the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are one of the core practices of Buddhism around the world. Life is suffering. There is a cause to suffering. There is an end to suffering. And there is a path which leads us to the end of suffering. And the path is, as most of you know, is called the Eightfold Noble Path. And that is composed of wisdom practices, practices which help us to understand the true nature of reality. Like we say in the practice principles, Dharma teaches us, you either have the teachings from the teachings of Buddhism, or you can have the teachings of life itself. Meditation, another part of the noble path, and so our zazen, and of course ethics being the other part of the noble path. And they come together like the three legs of a stool to support our practice. The practice principles also run parallel to the 4 great vows that we chant. Saving all beings, the first line of the great vows, the many beings are numberless, I vow to save them. So beings are suffering. The second vow, greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to see them or bring an end to them. That's the cause of suffering, greed, hatred, and ignorance, the delusions. And the third line, Dharma gates are countless. I vow to open to them, to enter them. In other words, being just this moment is like opening and embracing a Dharma gate, where the barriers we experience to the flow of life become gates to the flow of life. And the final vow about, the Buddha way is unsurpassable, the awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it fully. So being just this moment, compassion's way. So our practice principles resonate with all those Buddhist teachings. And there's another way of looking at the practice principles, which is also very important, and to see them as two couplets, the first and the second line, and the third and the fourth line. So the first and the second line, and the third and the fourth line reflect the two perspectives of the one reality. Sometimes you'll find in Zen Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism in general, people will talk about the two truths, the relative truth and the absolute truth, or the ultimate truth. And sometimes we will contrast these, like Barry Magid will talk about the first two lines, the conventional world we live in is the world of problems and relationships. It's the relational world, and that's the world in which we live in most of the time. And the third and the fourth line reference more this notion of the absolute. And so we could talk about that, the third and the fourth line, as being the koan aspects of our practice, the non-separation aspects of our practice, the non-separation from this moment just as it is, as we do in our just sitting practice. And that's really also what the core of koans is all about as well. Through our just sitting is like a koan practice in itself, just sitting, doing nothing, no gain, not seeking any gain, not seeking anything, is the gateway into this realization of the one true reality that we can't miss, that it's always just this moment. And of course, the other fact of it is we can experience this reality most of the time in terms of the duality. So like if being one with this moment is a kind of non-duality, then often we experience ourselves in this dualistic world of us and them, and we have different subjectivities, and we meet each other and we try and understand each other. But that's just another way of this one reality, how this one reality shows itself. So you get these two sides of the one reality. And in our practice, Barry Magid uses the metaphor of the duck and the rabbit. If you've ever seen that Gestalt drawing where you can see the duck and then you can't see the rabbit, then you can see the rabbit, but you can't see the duck, then you can see the rabbit and you can't see the duck, and it keeps changing all the time. In a sense, we're trying to hold those two perspectives and we're going in and out of them all the time. But as our practice matures, we try and understand that this is the way in which reality is always appearing to us as either a duck or a rabbit. And that is either as this non-separation, this oneness, everything is one, and also sense of separateness and duality, how we experience our life in the relational world. So we could say holding both perspectives on that one reality is the Zen way, the third way or the middle way of both one and two, both one and many. It's we don't if we collapse into just complete oneness, or if we just collapse into duality, we're missing that middle way. So our ordinary mind way is to integrate those two perspectives, the perspective of koans, the perspective of just sitting, with a psychologically minded approach to how we conduct ourselves in the everyday world of everyday Zen, of relationships and work. And that insight into the non-separation from the one true reality, the insight into the non-separation from just this moment, needs to be then integrated into basically our character formation, how we mature and develop as Zen practitioners. how we are able to do our best to do no harm in the world, do our best not to wrong people. But the relative world is the life of suffering. And this is the first two principles. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts. Exactly the dream. This is the world, the relational world that we live in. It's the world of problems and the world of relationships. It's all inclusive of duality, of otherness, of difference. And those first two lines about the problem of suffering, this is generally what we have many problems. All takes different forms and different shapes in people's lives. Some people's problems may be financial, other people's problems may be being isolated in their relationships. Other people will have problems with anger or problems with fear. They're all different kinds of problems we all experience all the time. And this is where we work with the precepts in that relational world. The absolute sense of the precepts is there is nobody to save, everything's one. But from the relational point of view, where we practice, we can do wrong, we can do relationships badly, and we can do relationships a little bit better. So we are in that world of doing our best to conduct ourselves in a way in which is empathic and compassionate in that relational world. So our psychologically minded approach is concerned with helping us to develop insights into how to practice at that relational level. And this particular, what we talk about in our Zen is traditionally was not covered in traditional Zen practice. Traditional Zen practice was all concerned with the koans, with the having an insight into the oneness of reality, either through a just sitting practice in the Soto tradition or through koan practice in the Rinzai tradition. There was no real awareness of the unconscious or of how we develop insight into our core beliefs or strategies or any of that kind of stuff. So this is also in this relational world, it's okay to talk about means and ends. It's okay to talk about getting better at something. So for example, unlike our just sitting practice of no gain, or unlike koan practice, for those of you who are familiar with, say, mindfulness-based stress reduction, well, that's very much a means to an end. You can learn various skills to help you reduce your stress levels. You can learn various skills to help you to reduce your anxiety levels. And that's perfectly fine and really good. And that's operating at that relational level, not at the koan level. It's also this is the place where we talk about how we can get caught up in our core beliefs of I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, no one will ever love me, I'm bad. And the kind of strategies we develop as a child through adolescence into adulthood to try and help us navigate relationships when we are caught in those kinds of beliefs. That's all part of these first two lines, working in that way. As I said before, in the relational world, we can do wrong and we can hurt others. It's important to apologize and make amends in this relational world. Relationships can be done well or badly. Problems arise often and are made worse through identification with thoughts and beliefs. Many of us, most of us experience some kind of trauma, relational trauma, and where we develop that sense of separation, like a core vulnerable me inside here and a world out there which can be very threatening and impinging, especially in a relational context. So I need to protect myself and build a wall around myself and to ensure that I don't get hurt again. That's all part of these first two lines. So from this kind of psychological perspective, Joko talked about core beliefs and strategies. Barry talks about self-centeredness as a kind of defensive attempt doomed to fail, to maintain a barrier between a perceived inner vulnerable self and an outer impinging, hurtful, impermanent world. Barry's description of the self-centered dream, the first two lines, I'll just give you a quote. It's a lovely description from a psychological perspective of the self-centered dream. If we want to think about an intersection of Buddhist and psychoanalytical pictures of the self, one place to start would be the idea that the self is that process of endlessly trying to control and fix and manage our emotional life, our feelings and our pain. We can sort of say we're the sum of all these processes of trying to have things go in a way that is going to avoid touching or triggering all these old hurts. Now, in Buddhist terms, we could say that the self is in the business of sort of constantly denying the reality of impermanence and interdependence. As Barry says, the self-centered dream is a dream of separation and permanence. However, the second line of the practice principles, caught in a self-centered, holding to self-centered thoughts, that gives us a little clue as to the pathway through this. So holding, as most of you realize, holding implies this clinging or resistance to life as it is. So we need to let go. And we need to stop resisting life as it is. We need to stop resisting impermanence and interdependence. So this then leads to the third and the fourth lines. But just before we jump to the third and the fourth lines, I just wanted to say something that the practice principles misses out on a little bit, and that's the area of supportive relationships and mutual recognition. You know, from childhood through adolescence through adulthood, we all need supportive relationships, and we all need some kind of mutual recognition from our family, from our friends. And the same applies with sanghas and teachers. And so it's our capacity and our ability to sit in meditation, to just sit, to practice koans, to practice just sitting, is dependent upon what's come before, the kind of relationships we've been embedded in that allow us to practice in that way. So that's a very important prerequisite for practice. We're not born with the ability to sit zazen. It's something which is developed. In the old days, youngsters went to the monastery to do that. These days, we are dependent upon our friends, sangha, teachers, etc., mentors. So it's okay to realize ultimately life as itself, being just this moment, is the only teacher. That's true. But in my experience, we need a human, all too human mentor or teacher to support our realization of life as it is the only teacher, or friends, or supportive relationships. In order to practice zazen, we need to have a certain kind of character. We need to be able to develop a commitment and a sense of being of service to the community. And so from this relational perspective, we have many, many teachers, not just life itself, but we have relationships with significant others. These may be people we've never met. It could be a Buddhist teacher you've never met, but a particular book you read, which was an important influence on your life. Could be a singer-songwriter that influenced you in some way. It could be an artist or a novelist or a politician, someone who inspired you. So the teachers that we have along the path are not always people that we've met, but often it is significant people we may have met. For some people, it might be the pet dog, or it could be for children. It might be a Marvel comic superhero. And we have relationships with works of art, and we have relationships, of course, with nature, with the natural world. Many people talk to me about how important teacher nature has been to them, and the importance of getting into nature in terms of their sense of well-being and peace of mind. So we need to wake up and have this realization of non-separation from reality, from just this moment. And that can sometimes happen in these marvelous experiences people have called Kensho or Satori experiences. But sometimes people can actually wake up before they grow up, and that's very problematic. And so there's been a number of different stories of young practitioners in the early 20s that have had amazing Kensho experiences. But unfortunately, it was all downhill after that, because the psychological baggage they carried from their childhood was never recognized, was never seen or addressed by any of their teachers. So they just got deeper and deeper into trouble on a psychological level. So I'm now going to talk about the third and the fourth line. This is the part of our practice, which is the koan practice. It's the just sitting practice. It's the non-separation from suffering. So the good news is that suffering can be brought to an end, but the bad news is the way in which we bring suffering to an end is to embrace suffering, to be non-separate from suffering. And from that, continuity of what Barry calls a bottom-up practice, this sense of not chasing after special experiences, but just the regular practice of just sitting, being of service to others, gradually erodes that sense of separation and that sense of inadequacy and that sense of lack. And a little bit gradually it starts to seep into us that everything is actually really okay. There's a sense of okayness that comes from our practice, which is much more preferable to a big Kensho experience that then disappears after a few days into the past and into a memory. So now I'm going to read you a little story about enlightenment. Some of you may have, maybe you haven't actually heard this story. I came across it in a psychoanalytical book. Okay, here's the story. It happened once that two teachers were discussing the question of how one becomes enlightened. The first said that it was like traversing a wall, leaving the enclosed room one has always been living in, and entering into another chamber, another domain, another atmosphere. There is a door, but it has no handle, no way of opening it. So one must knock and knock and knock, hour after hour, day after day, year after year, until one day, perhaps, when one least expects it, suddenly it opens, and one finds oneself effortlessly translated into another world. The second teacher demurred. No, he declared. The truth is, there is no door. There never was one. All one need do is walk right through. Who, then, is right? Both are enlightened beings and in touch with truth. A third teacher appears and says, I've been listening with great interest to your discussion. We have here a paradox. You are both right. The higher truth is, of course, that there is no door. But how does one find out that there is no door? One must knock and knock and knock, hour after hour, day after day, year after year, until one day, perhaps, you look, and to your astonishment, you see that there is no door and realize there never was one. Or if you want a really short sentence about enlightenment, how about this one from Joko Beck? Enlightenment is the ending in yourself of that hope for something other than life being just as it is. So, the end of suffering is non-separation from suffering. Or we could say, the end of suffering is the end of the resistance to suffering. Suffering is resistance to life as it is. As our practice matures, our resistance to life as it is begins to decrease. We become more open to being vulnerable. We become more open to tolerating discomfort. We become more open to tolerating various levels of anxiety or fear. We become more willing to flow with life as it is, whatever it might be that we're experiencing. But like many people do, it's probably helpful to make a distinction between pain and suffering. So we could say that suffering comes to an end through non-separation, hence the resistance stops. So like if we think suffering is resistance, then the resistance stops, the suffering comes to an end. But that doesn't mean pain comes to an end. You know, we can experience levels of physical pain, and sometimes it will be absolutely necessary to take some kind of medication to help you with those levels of physical pain. But of course, we can feel all kinds of emotional pain, such as the loss of a loved one or the loss of a loved pet. So really, we don't really want that kind of pain to go away. We don't want to live a life where we don't feel the loss of something important to us. So that's where we embrace pain. We embrace emotional pain because it's part of being human. We don't reject it. We embrace it. We embrace attachment. We don't, in our ordinary mind practice, we don't try and cut ourselves off from being attached to loved ones or pets or anything like that. We actually open ourselves up to that very human and desirable experience of being attached. So from the absolute perspective, it's all one, non-separation from life as it is. This is the practice of zazen, surrendering to the one true reality that is always perfect just as it is. However, if we get stuck there, that wipes away otherness and difference, and this is a problem. So we can't get stuck in oneness. We have to return to the relational, and we continue to integrate this realization of oneness into the relational world in which we live. So you're going to be different to your wife or your husband or your partner, but you can also see at the same time they're human beings just like you. They breathe just like you. They have bodies just like you. They're dependent on oxygen and food just like you. We're all one in that way, and we're all going to die, the great equalizer. But we're also always going to be totally uniquely ourselves. So the kind of picture of oneness we have is the kind of one body. We're all one body, we're all part of that one body, but we're all functioning in slightly different ways. Or if you want to use the analogy of the fruit tree, that we're all one tree, but each one of us, a little fruit hanging down is unique and slightly different to all the other fruits. But unlike fruits, we're human beings, and we can actually talk to each other and tell each other stories, which makes it not fun. So we have these different versions of oneness. So in Zen, we speak of the one body. We are all one body made up of different bodies, each body breathing like one body breathing. So our oneness in Zen includes difference. It's true that Joko Beck rejected the koan curriculum because she thought that the traditional way of doing koans actually was designed and practiced in such a way that it encouraged emotional bypassing. And that's why practitioners got into trouble with sexuality and alcohol and other stuff. So she dropped the koan curriculum, but Joko never dropped the spirit of koans. Joko was much more interested in what she called the koans of everyday life. She wanted to bring the non-separation, that experiential dimension of koans into our everyday life of love and work, the koans of everyday life. So if you're experiencing a problem with anger or with anxiety, the koan of anger and anxiety from Joko's perspective is to become non-separate from the anger, non-separate from the anxiety. And that's how you practice at that level of non-separation, as well as bringing insight and awareness into the thoughts or beliefs that you might be getting caught into at the same time. So the last two lines of our practice principles are basically about non-separation from this absolute reality, the koan's perspective of non-separation. From this perspective, suffering is no longer a problem. And the realization that our true nature, if practiced from the bottom up, delivers a sense of a basic sense of okayness, that sense of that realization when the Buddha saw the morning star, that the morning star was perfect just as it is. In the same way, I am perfect just as I am. Buddha nature is impermanent and interdependent, and it's also perfect just as it is. We are not separate from Buddha nature. And there is nothing missing and nothing lacking in Buddha nature. Zazen, our core practice of just sitting, is also a koan. It's concerned with non-separation from just this moment. No gain, no goal, no means to an end. It's already complete. There's nothing else to add to it. You can't add anything to Buddha nature. You can't, it's already here, embodied, this body. Zazen, non-separation from life as it is. From a Zen perspective, Zazen is being life as it is. This is our ultimate teacher. Non-separation as non-avoidance. It's just staying with the anger, staying with the anxiety. Leaving everything alone, this paradoxical thing that Barry teaches, our zazen, just sitting, teaches us to just leave everything alone. And the funny thing is, if you start to do that on a regular daily basis over a number of years, that sort of the trickle-down effect, which doesn't happen with a special Kensho experience, does start to happen with this regular practice, where you start to realize after a while that this ordinary mind, this ordinary experience we're all having, is pretty amazing and pretty wonderful. And it's something there's no end to how we can appreciate that. And I think maybe there's a certain aspect of the life cycle about this. I think as I get older, I appreciate it more. As I get closer to death and the end of all of this miracle that we're all living every day, that's all there is and that's all we need. We also, as human beings, of course, need supportive relationships. That never ends. So Buddha nature is perfect just as it is. It is what we already are. And this realization is experienced as this basic sense of ontological okayness. We're already okay. And even if you're carrying around neuroses and you still got suffering from the effects of trauma, this basic sense of okayness, your basic sense of Buddha nature, when you realize that, it's still okay. And from that non-separation, our last line, compassion's way, we respond in the relational world from that sense of compassion and non-separation. We're responding to each other, realizing at the same time we're not separate from each other. And we respond in that way from that place of non-separation, which is beyond right and wrong, in the same way that you can't do just sitting right or wrong. It's not just not on that page. And so from that perspective, we're all one. Everybody's already safe because there are no separate individual intrinsic cells that are separate, that are there to save. We're all aspects of this one body. So problems disappear into our life. Just to conclude, so just sitting is a kind of koan practice. We need to gain some insight into the one true reality experienced from both the point of view of oneness and also from the point of view of duality, of difference. We hold both perspectives and we integrate that into our everyday life. We could call holding those both perspectives the middle way. We're neither one nor two, we're both one and two. And we live in the relational world. That's the world of conventionality, but that's the world, that's as real as it's going to get. It's identical to the absolute. It's not different. It's just another way in which we experience it. And our ordinary mind way is to integrate the perspective of the koan just sitting with our psychologically minded approach to practice. And the process of maturation or character development is the fruit of this integration, or what the Japanese teacher Uchiyami Roshi describes as becoming a true adult. Because as we all know, there are too many children in very powerful positions at the moment who are running the world. And the world really needs an adult to step forth. And that's what our practice is all about, to become an adult. I'll leave it at that. And I'll stop the recording and